speaking of vultures looking for a carcass, Krystal and Sagar decided to jump into listen to this, oligarch disaster. That's what they're calling this. This is because rich people lost their houses. So the poor people that lost their houses, or the middle income people that bust their ass just to be near a good school, those fuckers deserved it. LA hellscape fueled by oligarch greed, rigged politics. Well, I've told you about the LA City Council. I'm curious about where she gets oligarch from, except for it's just like, it's oligarch is the, is deep state for the left side of the equation. It's like a stand-in word.
Joe and Mika may have gotten a little more than they bargained for recently with a guest appearance by Professor Scott Galloway, who unloaded on the ultra-rich and warned that the current oligarchic path risked revolution.
Once
Oligarchic path?
you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where, say, above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between 30,000 a year for a household and 50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness. But these individuals have weaponized government, and we risk revolution, whether it's CEOs being murdered in the street, whether it's a Me Too movement that had righteous components of it, or Black Lives Matter. What are these movements? They are targeting the wealthy. We are in the midst of a series of small revolutions to correct income inequality. And
No. Like, first of all, BLM and Me Too can't be just written off as class warfare, especially the number of like well-to-do and well-known and like women in high positions who had to put up with men in high positions who are nearly on the same level. You don't get to just co-opt the sexual trauma of women for your argument in this case. You can make the case without it. BLM is about violence, not about status. It's so fucking lazy. Because then the argument would be, as long as an OJ goes free on the regular, it would be fair. There'd be like a balance to it or some shit. Like, fuck out of here.
The reason we put an insurrectionist and a rapist in office is because for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. Why? Because the majority of households are having the oxygen sucked out of the room, such that a small number of individuals and a small number of companies can be worth more than nation states.
Hold on. And again, I don't know where they're starting this clip, but for real. Oxygen sucked out of the room? Like, I get the argument. This is when I talk about like bad shepherds of good ideas. They're worthwhile conversations to have. And then like if somebody comes in here with like double barreling it in every fucking direction, there's an element of the audience that will immediately go, this rocks. And then everybody you're trying to convince and bring over goes, this dude sounds fucking nuts. And nobody's on the right side of this.
Inequality is out of control. Our tax policy has gone full oligarch.
Full oligarch.
Yeah, again, what the fuck does this have to do with the state of fires in the Palisades spreading to Encino and spreading to other places? If you're gonna make that fucking case, and I hope he did, at least go, if you don't pay taxes, we don't have any money to expand the fire department and to protect people from shit. And so it's eventually going to come like at a certain point, I don't know, was the argument on that segment that people are applauding the burning down of Henry Winkler's house or some shit, or fucking Dick Van Dyke's house, because the house he's owned since 1965, burned down? Yeah, BLM was about police brutality. It wasn't about jobs. It's such a weird thing. I mean, like, there are issues to do with this, but that was, Again, you don't help when you just do a dog pile of every issue. It makes it a mess.
Galloway here lays out some pretty undeniable truths that are seldom heard on mainstream airwaves. The results of unchecked capitalism colliding with unlimited money in politics.
Unchecked capitalism. Unchecked. What does that mean? Does anybody? Chat room. Anybody know what that means? Unchecked capitalism? Do we have unchecked capitalism in this? We have definitely income inequality, if equality is actually a thing you can mandate or manage. That's a whole separate conversation. But unchecked, like gibberish. It's just gibberish. It's that's the problem with this. Again, if the point is we need higher taxes on wealthier people, they got to pay their fair share, and they've been paying less than that for a long time. That's a conversation. That's real conversation. But the idea that somehow we're like LA County is like a demilitarized, non-incorporated area between Cambodia and Vietnam, that there's no sheriff, nobody's there, and they trade in human beings openly, right? That's unchecked. The argument is the checks that we have to be enforced, and the checks that we have maybe need to grow, or they need to be cut for, lower income people need to have less of a tax burden in a couple of areas. Think the pink tax. Get rid of the pink tax. Women should not have to pay sales tax on feminine hygiene products, because it's special to them. Men don't ever have to pay that, and it's unfair. So that would be put a check on capitalism in that regard, I guess, or government funds or some shit like that. Like, that would be a balancing situation. But if it's unchecked capitalism, fuck, we care about pink tax. This is like, might as well be like open air slave markets in Libya or something, right? It's just lame. Like, I hate this fucking placeholder language because it doesn't do anybody any good.
Are playing out in front of our eyes every single day.
They're playing out in front of our eyes every single day. Okay. Every single day.
And the outcome is nothing less than annihilating catastrophe. We've rushed headlong into an era of full-on zero-sum, dog-eat-dog politics, both between individuals and between nation-states. The apocalyptic LA fires and the...
Whoa. You can't just... between nation-states? Sorry, you can't use that guy's clip about the tax burden on the middle class versus the tax burden on the upper class, and the happiness index between people who have a lot of money and people who have less, and go, it's to blame for Russia attacking Ukraine now, or Gaza.
Response to those fires are a perfect case in point. So first,
Great. Awesome. This will solve it. This will explain it. She said the fires are a perfect case in point. Excellent. Because I don't understand. This is all over the fucking map, and it's garbage. It's just like somebody rolling into this, like in a church. If a preacher just walked in and went, Jesus and love and Jesus, and the sinner will pay, and Jesus knows that this a joy and the rapture is coming. Just like color form, or like a refrigerator poetry of Christianity. Just walk in there with a handful of these fucking magnets and throw them on the fridge and go, that's my sermon for today. You recognize all these words? Do you agree with most of them? Sure. Do you care about the order they're in? Yes, maybe. Not really. I just like the dopamine hit from hearing them.
Start with the basics here. Whatever legitimate criticisms there are of the political response from Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, the primary driver of this LA catastrophe was extreme weather fueled by climate change, something that no state, even one as large as California, can possibly fight on their own.
Right. But I'm sure you guys over there, you and Sagar, defended the fuck out of Biden for two of the most forward-looking bills dealing with climate change in our nation's history. The Infrastructure Act and the Rescue Plan had more green energy promotion in it and more like limits on fossil fuels in it than any other legislation in the history of the... As a matter of fact, I'll go you one better. than all legislation so far. And I'm sure that she came to Biden's defense every single day because this is what matters. Climate change is so big, we all have to work together. Biden comes in, throws all of his political capital behind it, makes sure it's in both of these bills. He manages to get them through the fucking House and the Senate, gets Republicans on board with voting for a bunch of them, and I'm certain, and I don't obviously watch enough of them to know this, but I can assume from what she's saying and the import that she's putting on climate cover-up that she, more than anyone, defended the Biden administration's climate record with every breath in her fucking body, the entirety, and her husband, what's his name? Kyle Kleptocrat. What's his name? Anyways, I'm sure the two of them just every day couldn't wait to get on the air and defend Biden because he had done more for the environment than any president since Jimmy Carter and all of the other presidents combined. I'm certain she knows this. She can't not. But as far as she's concerned, from what I saw over the last year, the Biden-Harris record versus Trump-Pence, it's kind of a wash.
In fact, the data from last year just dropped at the same time as the wildfires, confirming 2024 was, once again, the hottest year on record. That it was the first year to breach a...
Yeah, as Democrats have been saying till they are fucking bluer in the face.
1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7...
Hold on. Fuck you. I'm insulted that she even has to bring this up. Trump wants out of the fucking Paris Accord, thinks all this is nonsense, calls it the Green New Scam, and Democrats have done everything they can to get stuff passed. And these two decided around the election it was basically a coin flip.
7-degree Fahrenheit increase from pre-industrial times. What's more...
From pre-industrial times. Oh, dear.
The last 10 years were all the hottest 10 years on record, lest you think that this jump was an anomaly. Wildfires are but one of the catastrophes which have increased in frequency and severity thanks to human-fueled climate change. Researchers have taken a look at these specific wildfires in LA and found that man-made impacts are the predominant cause of this.
January 2025, California wildfires have been fueled by meteorological conditions strengthened by human-driven climate change. Strengthened by human-driven climate change.
This catastrophe, in other words, the Santa Ana winds, they aren't the anomaly. The hotter air and drought conditions driven by climate change are what really made this horror. Now, climate change and its attendant catastrophes are best understood as a consequence of oligarchy.
I asked for it, didn't I? I did. Like, we just had to. She's just gonna oversimplify this. Why don't you just say the Illuminati then? Why don't you just say, because the oligarchy is making us all drive gas cars from 1945 to about, I don't know, 8 years ago? That's the oligarchy? Or the fact that that was just primarily the propulsion point that everybody committed to because it worked the best and it advanced life and extended life all over this fucking planet. Shit. It's going to aggravate me. And don't think for a second this isn't we need as a brand spokesperson for a brand ambassador for Aptera, a completely solar fucking car. We need to move past this. But let me tell you, oh god, human. I need a chart so I can show this. Give me a chart, you bastard. The Okay. Sum of energy's model of worldwide population. Because of the introduction of fossil fuels, there has been what is referred to as the energy-based population growth model, and the discovery of its pattern, which is, one, the introduction of a new energy source, coal and steam engines for trains, and then you go to gasoline and diesel for vehicles, raises population's carrying capacity, and population grows towards that new limit. After energy source adoption matures, population growth due to that energy source slows as competition for the energy source intensifies and its production reaches a peak. We have not reached peak production as far as the available stuff, because we just have so many plants and so many gas stations and all this shit anytime soon. We will run out of oil in the ground before the machines stop producing the gas. There'll be a delay in the timing. Like if the well ran dry, the oil that was taken from that well will still be processed into gasoline as that thing has gone empty. It happens all the time. And, but, overall, that's more than likely how it will run. If we don't come up with a solution, that's how it's going to happen. And it's not doing it because there's some fucking mustachioed asshole sitting in a fucking mountain lair going, make them drive the dirty cars. Like, they don't give a fuck. If you're saying it's about money and who can make money, there's all kinds of ways to make money now that you don't. Resource capitalism like that is so fucking 14th century. But this is the primary point I'm trying to make. Introduction of a new energy source. You put gas and oil out there as a possibility. Then you can now drive food and other supplies out into the middle of Africa, South America, Middle East, Asia, places it could never reach before. And the population, areas where there were 10 people, now have 65. And areas that have 65 people now have 300. And areas that have 300 now have 1,000. And that's how you get to 9 billion fucking people on the planet. And this might shock this dizzy fuck and her buddy, but the bloom of humanity is why we use oil and gas the way we do, because it's so simple and the refining of it is so much easier and takes so much less advanced technology that of course it jumped to the front of the fucking line. We will eventually clear this hurdle as humanity. But this damage wasn't done this year or last year or 10 years ago or 1980. This started in the fucking 30s, along with the growth of humans that came from it. I've said this a bunch of times, and there is this kind of like cold turkey idea that gets floated by these assholes that throw paint on art and try to block the road and shit like that. And they're like, no petroleum tomorrow. Stop right now. No more drilling. Stop it immediately. Okay. If they got what they wanted, if these people got, like, not wean us off of it, we've got to start coming up with other solutions and fast. We've got to, articulate a better system wherein people can adopt electric cars and charging and solar and all that stuff faster. No, cut it off tomorrow. Stop. No oil, no gas. Done. If you do that right now in the world as it is, where real human beings live, within 8 months, 1 billion people will be dead. Maybe 13 months if everybody scrambles and people are pulling wagons full of food out in the middle of nowhere. But the third world that is ballooned in population will cadaver. And you know who's going to die? Babies and old people. Because those are the people who need their food brought to them. That's where the service comes to it. That's where other countries bring in supplies for starving children. That's where the refugee situations happen. And all these countries that make their entire GDP off of oil and gas, all these third world countries, they're fucking dead. They're not going to transfer over to all become fucking master jugglers and perform all over the world in Cirque du Soleil performances all of a sudden. That transition away from a resource-based economy takes fucking time. That's why there's stuff in all of the like the Paris Accord and in all these things to try and move towards helping these countries, you know, deliver something else besides oil and gas. And the idea that she's going to go tisk at fucking California or at Democrats about this shit. Fuck you, lady. Fuck you. Because there's video after video after of her going, I don't know, you're voting for Biden might as well be Hitler.
Both in terms of the emissions, which have led us to this era of routine catastrophe, and in terms of the lack of sufficient response. Remember.
Hold on. Lack of, okay, maybe she's getting to taxes people don't want to pay.
Oil and gas executives at Exxon, they knew that carbon-based fuels were the primary driver of climate change nearly 50 years ago, back in 1977. Instead, though, of acknowledge an unprofitable truth, they engaged in a web of lies and deceit.
Actually, it's not just oil and gas. It's methane from extraction that everybody blames it on cow farts, but methane extraction, you know, methane that is leaked during oil and gas extraction is the worst of the gases, that the greenhouse gases. Just saying.
Massive cover-up to keep the public from understanding the consequences of carbon emissions. They even enlisted in this cover-up some of the very same consultants that the tobacco industry used to lie about the link between their product and cancer. While it is no longer tenable to out-and-out deny climate change, this cover-up...
But also, real quick, slight difference, an important distinction. And because here's the thing, we can't be fucking lazy about this conversation. This this oligarch us versus them conversation when we all drive cars is fucking lazy. Nobody takes a cigarette to work. Nobody pays like fucking, I don't know, $200 a month to park their pack of cigarettes at the office. Nobody needs to take a pack of cigarettes to go across country to visit the family. There are totally different things. Like tobacco is an optional and arguably passively medicinal bad habit. It's an addiction. Oil and gas are the reason ambulances run right now. So fucking simmer with the oil and gas and tobacco shit. Like, it's just... And if we just buried Carter and he put fucking solar panels on the roof and we were all proud of it, and then Reagan took them down, and if we'd have just advanced based on the solar panels back then, but you think these assholes were big champions of Jimmy Carter? You think she was big on the Egyptian-Israeli peace accords?
And obfuscation continues to this day, but with more sophisticated strategies. A couple years back, a lobbyist who thought he was being interviewed for a job was caught on a secret recording by Greenpeace UK explaining ExxonMobil's tactics for blocking action, like, for example, backing solutions they understand to be politically infeasible, like an across-the-board carbon tax. He also explained the way that they buy politicians and use those politicians as their pawns.
A man boasting at a job interview? Or a never-seen-before look at how big oil tries to manipulate big power?
So it's one of those two things. Is he bullshitting and he's just trying to look like he's in the know, or is it actually a thing? All right.
Or both.
Or both.
First, the targets. Congressmen are fish. Exxon is the fisherman.
When you have an opportunity to talk to a member of Congress, you know, I liken it to fishing, right? You have bait, you throw that bait out, it's all these opportunities that you use, and to use the fishing analogy again, just to kind of reel them in, because they're a captive audience. They know they need you and I need them.
Senators pressed to do Exxon's bidding behind closed doors.
You want to be able to go to the chief. Yeah. And so the chief knows you, that you can go to the chief and say, look, we've got this issue. We need Congressman so-and-so to be able to introduce this bill. We need him to make a floor statement. We need him to send a letter. Yeah. You name it. We've asked for everything.
But it's not just the fossil.
Yeah, wait, though. You don't get to just go politicians and fucking shrug. This goes exactly like, what would you come away from that if I hadn't mentioned the two biggest pieces of green legislation in the existence of the fucking country that happened under Biden? It just sounds like all politicians. Nobody gives a shit. They're all controlled. Well, then why are Democrats always voting for legislation like this? And not because they won't go all in, because of the reasons I said before. Because it's a complicated issue. Not because they don't want to, but because they want to wean us off properly so there's not a snapback.
Fuel executives who have an interest in the status quo. The new tech oligarchs are equally interested in downplaying the climate.
What kind of car does Krystal drive? And how new is it?
Crisis. This even applies to Elon Musk, who of course founded.
I don't know. I would like to know. I could probably upgrade my car. My car is a 2012, but I don't have to yet. It still runs. It's got decent gas mileage, and until such time as I can replace it with a full electric, I will keep it instead of just switching cars every 3 years or something, so that another one has to be made. I'm still driving that fucker, and it works just fine. That is my way of not wasting until such time as I can make the full transition. What do you think? What do you think the car situation at the Ball household is?
An electric vehicle company. First of all, implementing an adequate climate response would require upfront federal government spending and a strong federal government. Things the ultra-wealthy absolutely hate because they want to keep their taxes low, and the government too weak to interfere in their business crimes and monopolies. But the tech oligarchs have another massive...
Sorry, real quick. Business crimes and monopolies. So the people in the movie industry in LA, people who work in prop departments and stuff, who have apartments and live in and around Los Angeles, whose houses burn down or afraid of, like, they're buddy with fucking Exxon. How you're missing the impact that modern medicine has made in human population. No, I'm not QDC2. That's about length of life. And getting it to those people is a factor of petroleum as well. It just is. It's not optimal. It's got it achieved, I would argue, it passed its ROI probably 25 years ago. Which is, again, why Carter was ahead of his time, looking ahead to that horizon, trying to get us off that shit.
The business interest. Essentially, every large tech company that you've heard of, and plenty that you haven't, are engaged in an arms race to rapidly develop AI and push towards AGI, or artificial general intelligence. The amount of carbon emissions this race is fueling is quite vast. Few companies offer transparency about the energy required to train and run their tools, but research suggests it's extraordinarily energy intensive. In fact, Google blamed a 48% increase in emissions on its AI development. Microsoft had a similar explanation for its 29% increase in emissions. As NP...
What did their emissions start at? Don't give me a percentage unless you're going to give me a baseline. Let's run that back.
Train and run their tools, but research suggests it's extraordinarily energy intensive. In fact, Google blamed a 48% increase in emissions on its AI.
Cool. Let's look it up. Google, 48% AI emissions. Google greenhouse gas emissions have increased 48% in the last 5 years due to the expansion of data centers powering its AI tools. This is AI, and this is the BBC. This is what she's referring to. Imran Rahman Jones. Google's greenhouse gas emissions in 2023 were 48% higher than in 2019. According to its latest environmental report, tech puts it down to increasing amounts of energy needed by its data centers. AI-powered services include considerably more computer power and so electricity, standard online activity, prompting a series of warnings about the technologies of environmental. 24 environmental report, Google says it's due to increasing energy demands from the greater intensity of AI compute. Data centers are essentially massive collections of computer servers. AI needs a huge amount of them. Generative AI systems such as ChatGPT use 33 times more energy than machines running task-specific hardware. However, Google's report also reveals large global disparities in the impacts of its data centers. Most of its centers in Europe and the Americas get the majority of their energy from carbon-free sources. This compares with data centers in the Middle East, Asia, and Australia, which use far less carbon-free energy. Overall, Google says about 2/3 of its energy is derived from carbon-free sources. If you actually go into the data centers, it's really hot and really noisy, says Tom Jackson. People don't realize everything they're storing in the cloud is having an impact on their digital carbon footprint. Okay, that's not AI, but okay. There's a digital decarbonization design group, which tries to measure and find solutions to reduce the carbon footprint of data usage. Data providers have to work closely with large organizations to help them move away from storing so much of their dark data. That's your dead pictures that nobody needs to have. However, storing it on chips takes a large amounts of energy, even when it's not being used. That's not this. Again, this is not AI. This is cloud. On average, 65% of the data an organization stores is dark data. That means you're never going to see it again, and it's where you might need it in case of emergency. It should be hard stored on crystalline structures. That's just me. We'll get to that later. It commends Google's target of reaching net zero in its data centers by 2030, but says it will be really tough. Increasing energy and water use of AI has prompted a series of warnings, including the sector is forecast to keep growing rapidly. The boss of UK's National Grid said in March that the combination of AI and quantum computing would lead to a 6-fold surge in demand in the next 10 years. However, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates recently downplayed the environmental impact. Speaking in London last week, he suggested AI would increase electricity demand by 2% and 6%. The question is, will AI accelerate more than 6% reduction? And the answer is certainly, he said. Yeah. And what he's saying is there'll be a net reduction in energy use because AI is also helping us innovate faster. So in the short term, training the AIs uses a lot of energy. Once they're trained up, then their calculation ability is very low wattage. And the benefit of having them trained up in science and in the advancement of technologies is exactly, it will ultimately reduce energy. So in the short term, it's a spike, and then in the near after it goes down. And I'll show you an example. Is it best battery? Yeah, so yeah, here you go. This is a good example. AI comes up with a battery design that uses 70% less lithium. Researchers used AI to design a new material that they could use to build a working battery. It requires up to 70% less lithium than some competing designs. This is a similar kind of thing. So yes, is the spike in teaching it using a lot of energy? Yes. Will that constantly be the running part of it? No. But AI, scary, Skynet, bad, something.
AI development, Microsoft had a similar explanation for its 29% increase in emissions. As NPR...
Also, by the way, again, if you'll notice, most of them are at net zero in the States and in Europe already. So they're looking at like a 6% rise across all of them functionally.
Our writes, quote, Goldman Sachs
Thanks,
has
Tobias.
researched the expected growth of data centers in the U.S. and estimates.
Okay, and data centers are not AI. Data centers is cloud computing and where everybody's storing stuff.
They'll be using 8% of total power in the country by 2030. That's up from 3% in 2022.
Right. But also, people, when you use cloud computing, you can send a file and you don't have to drive it there. Instead of driving across town to deliver every email, click, clack. What uses less energy? A vehicle carrying a package of images for a case or a project, or emailing them, or sending them via Dropbox. See what I mean?
Analysts say, quote, the proliferation of AI technology in the data centers necessary to feed it will drive a surge in power demand, the likes of which has not been seen in a generation.
What was the last one? Let me guess. The last generational version we saw was manufacturing in Detroit when we had all these factories running all the time, coal-fired plants pouring steel into forms to make cars here in the, okay, and then they no longer use the grid. Yeah, coal-powered email, for fuck's sake, right.
But the oligarchs' grip on our government doesn't only block efforts to deal with climate change. As the ultra-wealthy's taxes drop near zero and a weak government allows their monopolies to flourish, fueling massive
a weak government? Okay.
inequality, the need to forcibly keep the peasants from finding their pitchforks also increases. That imperative, more than anything else, is what has driven an ever-expanding surveillance and police state. That's why even as our politicians insist we can't...
Citation needed.
afford to deal with climate or to provide healthcare or affordable childcare or free college or world-class...
Right, we have too many cops. That's why. We can't afford health care, not because Republicans are intransigent and they fucking stop it and would save money by being, like prescriptive in preventative care as opposed to dealing with it only when it's a catastrophic disease. That's not the problem. Republicans, scuttling a public option in every form, everywhere they possibly. That's not the problem. It's too many cops.
Infrastructure, there is a never-ending spigot of money for any agency filled with people with guns used to discipline the population. That includes...
No, there is not.
Of course, the military, FBI, CIA, Border Patrol, and of course, local police forces. So returning to our Hollywood horror, LA spent $1.73 billion on the police department in the last fiscal year, and Mayor Karen Bass upped that funding to $1.99 billion in the current fiscal year for a roughly $138 million increase. Once state and federal monies are included in that overall department budget, it is well over $3 billion. Meanwhile, the fire department budget was cut, something that turns out to be rather crucial in this moment. But never you mind, since state prison inmates are being pressed into service as firefighters, risking their lives for $10 per day to save homes.
No. Okay, first of all, this makes sense where she's going. Okay, first of all, let's go with Los Angeles has the fucking Olympics is coming. So not only does it deal with the regular crime issue that it has of the second most populous city in the entire country. It's also, let's see, what's LA County GDP, just in general. Yeah. The GDP of Los Angeles is $790 billion. That's just 2022. Percentage-wise, what do you think that compares to on how much a small town pays for their police department versus the number of people in the fucking city? Or the number of how much money goes through the city and terrorism and all that other shit. And also, thank you for the firefighters and those pressed into it. Yeah, well, thanks to them as well. And also, they're not pressed into it. Training as a fire department, as a firefighter, and then getting a job afterwards is how you shorten the time you spend in jail for the crime you committed. You're not just doing it for the $10. You are fed during your prison term, which you lost the right to move around in public for some reason. And if you want to believe that they were all just pulled over while driving with expired tags, ended up in state penitentiary, and now they're being forced into slave firefighting for $10 a day. I don't know what the fuck. I don't even know how to answer that. You get $10 a day on top of that for stuff you spend in there. But if you get sick while you're in prison, the state pays for it. You have health care more than the rest of the public does. You don't pay rent. You don't pay for food. It's not an optimal situation, but all of your bills are paid. And then you can make $10 extra, and they train you in a job, and it's more convincing to a parole board that you should be let out early because you not only chose to get a job and work on things, but you want to contribute to your fucking community. Right? Nobody has to do it. Nobody's being pressed into being a firefighter. They're not just rounding up fucking prisoners in their orange jumpsuit and giving them a fucking hose. And when these guys get out of jail, they can say to their community, I did my time, for what I did, and I made up for it, and now I'm a firefighter. Not only can they get their life back sooner, but they can get pride in what they've done. You talked about this topic before. I never knew it's about going towards time. Well, that's not your fault, Pretty in Blue. You know why? It's because assholes like this forget about it all the time. They just leave it out. Now, I would argue that where you do have a point about this kind of shit is like at one point Microsoft was having call centers in like these minimum security prisons. People were working time off, like they passed bad checks or some shit, and so they were outsourcing call center jobs to these kind of things, and they were like half-ass jobs. They were like not quite printing license plates, which is kind of it's a physically intense job around metal pressing machines and shit like that. It was like lame, and it was unnecessary. It wasn't like, okay, you're doing something that the state needs done. They were doing this kind of thing. And that was like back in the 90s. That was like call centers in jails was a big thing for a while. And then for the most part, California especially said, fuck that. And you're in here, you do your time. You can do a job that helps the taxpayer, but you can't get a secondary job that doesn't require you. It won't give you a skill you can't use outside. You're not going to move. You're not going to go to your parole board and go, I know I scammed an old lady out of her Social Security for a while and endangered her life by leaving her out in the fucking yard in a rainstorm and that kind of stuff. But I've been working in a Microsoft call center helping people with their, Windows 93. And therefore, I think I should be able to leave early because I'm going to get a job working in a call center that for Windows that doesn't exist because the only one that they pay for is actually in the prison. And once I'm out, what am I going to do? Work in another call center for other software? It's dumb. So they throw this shit around all the time. And my question would be, if somebody goes to jail, I don't know, for domestic violence. There was one particular dude, it was like 6 years ago, there was an interview with a guy who was fighting one of the fires up in Antelope Valley, I think it was. He was in jail for battery, domestic violence. And he was in anger management, and he had volunteered to join this program, and he was working as a firefighter, and the idea was he was going to get out early so that he could get his life back, and he was going to move and become a fireman and all this kind of stuff. And why was he in jail initially? Because he beat his girlfriend senseless. And he went to jail for it. I'd say like it was an 8-year sentence or something because it was pretty vicious and it was like stalking and some other shit. And then they were going to shave 2 years off his sentence. So he would be eligible for parole 2 years earlier. And so he did this, he learned a skill, and he was making it to the community by saying, hey, that's not me anymore. I'm getting therapy. I've done, anger management. I don't drink anymore, this kind of stuff. And I'm going to be a firefighter because I want to prove that I'm worth getting out earlier. That's rehabilitation. That is a great example, right, Mozart? That is a great example of actual rehabilitation. But the dude was in jail because he beat his girlfriend and he kept beating her. And he kept beating her. Again and again, till she was basically unrecognizable. Got 8 years for it. He was going to do 6 because he volunteered to be a firefighter. And he was trying to make good because they were drinking at the time and he was an alcoholic and that was part of the thing, whatever. That's the real story. No, she did not die. She lived, apparently, he wasn't in for murder. He was in for assault and domestic battery. The point I'm trying to make is, this is who she's talking about. That's there's a bunch of cases. Some people did far less. Some people might even do more, and they're not even doing it because they ever expect to leave. Maybe they're 25 to life, and they're never going to get out, but they get better you know, they get to call their family more often, or they have more family visitations or something like that because they're committed to being a better person while they're in jail. They're not getting $10 to fight fire in their fucking orange jumpsuit.
For billionaires who largely view them as animals.
Oh yeah, and by the way, they're fighting fires for billionaires. Not the people who live in apartments and houses, the elderly people who've been in their house since 1972. Billionaires, you know, fucking billionaires.
While the police that predominantly criminalize the poor are kitted up with military gear and fat budgets in Democrat and Republican cities alike, the kind of police which could curb oligarch financial crimes, they are under constant attack. It is no accident that both Mark Zuckerberg and Andreessen went on Rogan's podcast to trash the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has been inconvenient for both of their bottom lines. Musk.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure you defended the Obama and Biden administrations for both the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and their shoring up of it and going, look, there just is, you know, this is not even a lesser of two evils. One group wants to get rid of it entirely.
And others have also taken aim at the Securities Exchange Commission, which has dared to regulate crypto and to investigate Musk for market manipulation. Now, Musk, the oligarch king himself, has been given a direct commission to shape and slash the government in areas where it might theoretically check his power. You can bet any agencies involved in suppression of what Galloway described as mini revolutions will continue to be well funded, even as other agencies like the EPA and the National Labor Relations Board, which Musk believes is.
Also, Musk is picking fights with maggots who are supposedly, according to Chunk and her, more in line with the working class values or some, I don't know, it's gibberish.
Unconstitutional are starved. Elon is one of the Pentagon's top contractors, so you're a fool if you think that budget is going to face any real cuts under him. Instead,
no, he's not one of their contractors. They put satellites on his rockets. That's not the same thing as designing them themselves. And yes, I think he's too close to these things, but that's different than being Lockheed Martin or Boeing.
Instead, his wealth and those of the other favored oligarchs will continue to escalate, reaching new heights never before seen in human history. AI will revolutionize wealth extraction and consolidate even more wealth and power.
No, it won't. It's equalizing knowledge and software and technological availability to everyone on the planet. They couldn't charge what it's worth even to use it themselves.
Or at the very top. And that's to say nothing of the giant tax cut Trump has already promised these billionaires. And as these billionaires become increasingly untouchable, even by nation stage, each one individually too big to fail, they will go to greater and greater lengths to insulate themselves from the consequences of the globe being run exclusively for their benefit. This, too, we see playing out in LA. Hamilton Nolan wrote an excellent piece on this dynamic titled, quote, Lifeboat Capitalism, some burn, some drown, and some make money either way. In the piece, he writes that we have a choice to either confront the impacts from climate change together or separately. Together as a nation, helping each other in as egalitarian a way as possible, or in a Darwinian dog-eat-dog scramble for resources where the rich and the...
Jesus Christ. And look, if she'd have been like lockstep trying to make sure that Democrats are given every possible resource to do all the priorities that we've wanted all this time, she might have a dog in this fight, but this is fucking lame. You can't fucking both sides the shit out of Democrats and Republicans when the Democrats are the only ones pushing for any meaningful climate change stuff. Even the ones that are dragging their heels are light years ahead of any Republican on this issue. And again, the unfortunate part is that serious issues met with gibberish. Just fucking buzz phrase after buzz phrase with no intellectual value whatsoever. Because what is the result of the cumulative work of the dear Krystal Ball, who I used to have great affection for back when she was in the MSNBC days before I don't know what the hell happened. What's the end result? The end result was all during the last election. What's the difference between Trump and Biden anyways? That's where that's her argument. They'll jump in if Trump says something particularly awful and ride it around, like a show pony. But when it comes down to it, if you ask them what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans, they'll shrug it off. And if you're going to shrug it off, I don't want to fucking hear about this stuff. What's the difference between this and like a TV preacher? Is religion meaningful, and can it have important impact on people's souls and livelihoods? Yeah, absolutely. Is that what Jerry Falwell was doing? Is that what Paula White is doing?
Well-connected always come out on top of the pile. Of the latter option, he says, quote, "We know what that will look like, don't we? It will look like rich people paying any price for private firefighters to save their mansions as all around them burn. It will look like rich people wrangling government bailouts for their washed-away beach houses as poor people inland languish in the muck. It looks like large swaths of America becoming uninsurable and then being left to only the very rich who are willing to take the risk." And
no. The areas that are becoming uninsurable are the very places where the rich usually flock to. That's the problem with this entire area along like the coast and all that stuff. It's been this issue with mudslides and all kinds of stuff because the view is what people are paying for. Notice that Notice she's not talking about like large swaths of fucking Arkansas becoming uninsurable because of tornado lanes.
the very poor who can't afford to do anything else. It looks like climate refugees crowding our streets, refugees from poorer countries, and then also refugees from our own country. Looks like wealthier people building walls around their safe land and then writing checks to politicians who will tell the panicked middle-class people that the poor people are coming to take their place.
Again, what does this have to do with the LA fires in terms of rich, middle class, and I wouldn't say poor in that area. Although Topanga, there's a lot of floppers in Topanga, a lot of old people who bought their house for 50 grand back in the 60s and have lived in it the entire time. I'd say that qualifies as poor. Fixed income, a lot of fixed income people in that area all together, and a wall between them isn't going to separate shit on a fire like this. And here's the thing. The vast majority of these motherfuckers are against climate change, are wanting to do something. These are California voters. These are people who live in fucking Palisades and Topanga Canyon and the Hollywood Hills. These are not fucking upstate New York or Montana ranch rich people with a fucking underground bunker. These are the pro-gay marriage, pro-environmental granola, wealthy, with the rare exception, James Woods and Mel Gibson, maybe. But the rest of them, for fuck's sake, Dick Van Dyke lived there. They had to save him from his burning house. Sorry, what part of the oligarchy is Dick Van Dyke a slave to?
Either work to build more lifeboats and to make humane rules about who gets on them, or we can just let the strong people toss the weaker people into the water and sail away. Either by...
Can I, while she's making this very astute point about lifeboats, I'd like to point out that she's in obviously a very air-conditioned studio with nice lighting, in a quite lacy top. I mean, it's sure, it's flattering, as one might say, but this isn't her last report before going off the air. She will go back to this studio tomorrow, and it will still be there, and it will still be funded, and it will still have air conditioning, and it will still have snacks. So, fuck off with this lifeboat horseshit.
Action or by inaction, our government is going...
Oh, yeah. James, you're right, Carrie. Sorry, Carl? Is it? I can't see if it's a lowercase L or an I. Sorry. Carl, yeah. James Woods' house did not burn down. That is true. Yeah, he was whinging about it, but it turns out his house didn't burn. You're right.
going to effectively choose one or the other. I don't have to tell you which choice is being made in the current political dynamic. Look around. Billionaires building bunkers, learning to fight, buying properties in New Zealand, building literal spaceships in case they need to flee this doomed civilization altogether, buying entire social media platforms to spread a warped version of reality, which always happens to align with their own interests.
It also aligns with what you say.
They've decided to roll the dice, that they'll be able to personally escape the consequences of the world that they themselves set up.
This has been a story since the... Hold on. American Shelters Corporation. Look at this lovely shelter they'll build in the hill behind your house, where your wife can do the cooking, you can sit at a table with your pipe while the kids sleep in a giant bunk bed on the top. And then there's rolls of toilet paper and a couple of avocados and a bunch of canned beans and a little ventilation thing that, of course, obviously the zombies will urinate down and cause a lot of trouble, but it'll work its way out. There we go. Rand Shelters. It's a good company, and this nice, well-to-do family is going to get, ladies and gentlemen, their own fallout shelter built in the yard. Yes, we'll all have fun living inside this for days on end. Boy, it does start to smell after a while. Ventilation can be an issue. There's the little shower in the corner, and you can shit while you're showering. That's right. Family fallout shelter, 4 to 6 people. There you go. Look at this young lady selling the newest model. Well, isn't that right? Cutaway plan of community shelter under a bridge. Atomic shelters sold to the rich. There you go. Drinking water. There's that lady again. This is dude styling. Uh-oh. More like a bomb shelter. And then, Nuclear Fallout Shelters of America. Ladies and gentlemen, the Kiwanis Club welcomes you. Look at this fancy one. Your home should have a bomb fallout shelter. But only if you can afford one, while the rest of those poor people above ground are all cooked live.
Using their wealth and power as a shield. And to return briefly to Scott Galloway, whose video we started this monologue with, well, he can apparently see these dynamics pretty clearly when it comes to the U.S. context. He is completely blind when it comes to the same dog-eat-dog dynamics which are presently ascendant on the global stage. He celebrated Israel's genocidal actions in Gaza.
Well, I guess no one's perfect.
Unrestrained barbarity, backed by the global superpower, has helped to cement a global order that mirrors
unrestrained barbarity. Well, now it's unrestrained, thanks to you, asshole. Yeah. The Biden administration was limiting it, and they were doing what they could while trying to balance all the factors. But Trump's just told him, he just called the Palestinians a cancer and told them to get rid of them. So congratulations, dum-dum.
The zero-sum Darwinian scramble that increasingly characterizes our domestic life. Might makes right. The strong will brazenly and brutally gobble up whatever resources they possibly can.
Look, if you need to have this conversation with Kyle because of the Russian money that he's getting, don't torture the rest of us with it.
With military budget ever expanding to try to make sure that no other nations might get to have a say.
Well, I mean, which countries are we talking about that you think should have a say that don't? I mean, Russia and China are on the UN Security Council, so which countries do you think the United States is hell-bent on making sure doesn't actually get to have a say that you think should? Saudi Arabia, they need to have more of a say. Qatar, Kuwait, what do you think? I mean, Singapore is getting a lot of benefits, actually, from their relationship with the United States. Which South American country do you think? I'm just curious. I would like to know.
Wars for resources are frequently also driven by the insatiable appetites and needs of the oligarch class, whose children are never the ones sent to fight and die. In other words, oligarchy is the issue that connects all other issues: war, climate, poverty.
No, it isn't. No, it's just your simpleton brain way of avoiding any complex issues, because it is very difficult to sell a complex issue to a group of people and explain the variant elements of it, when it's much easier to just have a giant switch that says good and bad on the wall, and that your switch is always in the good position and everybody else's is always in the bad position. And it's a non-dimmer switch. Just saying.
Poverty, censorship, democracy. It's no accident that as the ultra-wealthy have pulled away into a superclass of global masters, we become unable to solve a single problem that really requires collective action.
We have? I'm sorry, we have? A single issue that requires collective action. Does she know how, like, global vaccination works, or anti-cancer treatments worldwide, or the coordination between countries to stop, I don't know, wheat blight when it breaks out? Does she have any idea, like, that the majority of people on this earth get up every day and bust their ass to make things better, and she has no fucking idea what they do with their day? Ugh.
Instead, we'll have to watch the fires burn and pray our loved ones are not in the disaster zone this time. And
anyways, we'll just pray our loved ones aren't in the disaster zone on fire this time, and we'll just, I don't know, if it happens again, whatever, okay. Look, what the fuck?
Sagar, this is a more...
Hey guys, if you want to see what I...
Oh, Jesus. Thank God at least they cut away from us where we had to hear his tired opinion on this shit. Again, I will say this. There are no partisan issues, only partisan solutions. And that includes whether or not the problem exists and needs to be solved or not. That would be a partisan aspect of it. Different sides, and this might shock some of you, there's a lot of overlap, because in a lot of cases, there's only a few solutions that actually can fix something. There just aren't that many options. Good old physics, you know, always getting in the way. And this this is the reason I push back and on the us versus them, oligarch, us 1%, blah, 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 is that on the one hand, somebody said the other day that, like, in the chat room, and I appreciate them typing it in there. I disagree with it, but I appreciate you putting in there, was that fight class war, not culture war. The problem you have is that many people in this country, many people across the spectrum, view class as a cultural element. Both people who are proud of being poor white trash, or people who are poor white trash and eventually see themselves moving into the upper crust. The vast majority of the tax policy in this country is not dictated simply, it doesn't get passed because rich people whisper into the ears of politicians and they just pass it. It's because there's a shit ton of voters out there who think, fuck, I'm going to win the lottery and the government's going to take half of it. We need low taxes, right? And not because they think billionaires shouldn't be charged more. They're just afraid when their day comes, when they roll the dice and it you know, comes up 7 or double sixes. I don't know. I don't shoot craps. If it comes up a winning choice, if they bet on black and it, you know, black 23 on roulette, that's easier, and it hits it, they're like, oh, fuck, the government's going to take half of my winnings. They think that. So they don't share, even if on all measures, financially, environmentally, the town they live in, the area, they don't see themselves as part of that same class. And they never will. Also, there's a bunch of rich people out there, this might shock you, that have almost no idea how they got rich in the first place. Just started doing what they loved and holy shit. And they just kept at it. And they didn't do it by putting other people's shit out of business, and they weren't cutthroat, murderous Wall Street types. They just went, oh, it's like a sign printing gap, and my town doesn't have a sign printing business, so we opened one here, and then we just didn't want to ship over like we were in Toledo, and we were like, we could sell in Columbus, but we had to drive up there all the time, so we'll open up another place in Columbus, and then, I don't know, 10 years later, I own 6 printing presses that make signs for car dealerships and shit, and I do $5 million worth of business, and I have 13 or, 65 employees statewide, that kind of shit. Those people are never going to be involved in a class war between the top and the bottom because they don't identify with either, and they're trying to move away from one and towards the direction of the other, but they don't need $1 billion to be happy. So they're just going to look at conversations like she was having, like, I honestly, lady, I don't know what the fuck, I got to go to work. That's why you have to talk to them about things that affect their lives, stuff that's outside. That's why government should handle the things that are too big for a business or even a group of individuals to do, without having to, I guess, revolution or whatever the fuck she's calling for. They're never going to do it. And rightly so, because it doesn't make any sense in their lives. It doesn't apply. I believe the lottery is a tax on the poor. Nope. You can think it's dumb. You might think it's, the money's supposed to go to schools and maybe it doesn't or something like that. Anything that's voluntary isn't a tax. Anything. It might be a sucker. You could call it like a sucker's tax, right? But it's not the same thing. And it matters how you talk about this stuff. Otherwise, it nullifies the rest of your conversation. It's the same thing as when fucking Tom Bilyeu and all these assholes say taxation is theft. No, it's fucking not. You have representatives. If you're outvoted, that doesn't mean you're being stolen from. It's just you haven't either been able to convince enough people or your own representative that there's a better way to tax the bracket you're in. But he actually fucking says this sometimes, and the people that say that, and by the way, this is what Ron Paul believes. They believe taxation is theft, which is fucking stupid. Try having a country. By the way, and this goes to my conversation about socialism that we have sometimes. We do not have socialism in this country in any form. We do not. We have democratic taxation. We have taxation with representation. Now, you could say it's out of balance. You could say it needs work. You could say it's completely fucking out of whack. But we do have representation. We have House seats. We have states. We have states that, state houses that push back on what the federal government takes, vice versa. Right? That's representative taxation. And here's how, like bridges, fire departments, all that stuff, it's socialism, right? No, because kings, monarchies take taxes and they have fire departments and they have roads. They had fire brigades in England, all this shit under the king before the parliamentary system. When it was a strict monarchy, kings used to take a tax from the people all the time to pay for shit. Standing armies, roads, water, aqueducts, mining, all that kind of shit, okay? They did. The difference was you didn't have a say. You couldn't go, why the fuck are we doing that with our tax dollars instead of that? Everybody here thinks we need more food and less shiny rocks. I appreciate you like wearing a shiny rock hat. The hat with all the shiny rocks on it. Fine. But can we have less shiny rock hats and more grain, right? That's the difference. So, the cost of ammunition is a tax on poor people? You mean poor people have to pay more for ammunition than rich people? I mean, nothing you pay for is a tax directly. No direct thing that you have to buy on your own, unless you're talking about military spending, which is something you pay for with taxes. So it's still not the same thing. Again, this language matters. And I know there are plenty of people that, don't worry, there are plenty of people out there who will parrot the kind of shit that she and Kyle and some of these other dickheads will parrot. And I know it feels good to hear it sometimes. But all it does is play right into the hands of Republicans, and it's gibberish to start with, and it won't solve the problem. You guys, well, here's the thing. As we get towards over the next year, I've decided, we were talking about this shadow government idea, or this shadow bureau, or whatever they wanted to call it. What's the word for? I don't know what I'm blitzing on. I was like, you know what? I should do a shadow presidency, which is when something happens, here's what I would do, and just release a policy paper as if, and that way people could check my work as shit goes. You know what I mean? We should do this, 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 and this, right? And then over the next few months, people will be able to look back at what I prescribed and go, yeah, that would have worked, or it didn't, or it wouldn't work, or it could have worked, right? It's kind of like when you do one of those, when you play the stock market, but you don't put any money on stuff, you just use one of those kind of game versions of it, or Sim Earth kind of thing, and you see how it goes. Shadow cabinet, thank you. But it wouldn't be a shadow. That's why I was stuck on it. Shadow Hal, that's funny. Right? But I'll present some of the things that I think we could do. And, when these things come up, as like policy papers when I can, because as soon as I'm done with this, like presenting this bots bill to the California legislature, which was obviously hung up by the fire stuff. It's one of the things I would like to do. Look at stuff and go, here's what should be done. This would be my prescription for things. And you can, I have no doubt it would be a good learning experience to float these ideas as they stand, and remedies that will come, and the like. Yes? So, anyways, just a thought, just between you and me and the kidney, that we...
The kidney has a very special place in the heart.
Okay, well, yeah, you got to end on something extraordinarily stupid. Except this. Can I show you one thing before I go? Can I show you one thing? Does anybody remember the old Battlestar Galactica series? Remember the original one? The modern one was cool, no doubt. Do you remember the original? And they had a dog on this show. They had a robot dog that looked more like a bear, but was the dog, and actually had a chimpanzee in it at one point. Like, I don't know if they kept using it that way. They didn't use it very often because of this, but it had a monkey in the actual suit. Right? Remember that? Yeah, the bear dog. I have had this toy since I was, what was I, 11? 10? Is that the one with Twiggy? No, that's Buck Rogers. I have that one too. I'll dig that one out for you later. Yeah. A Daggett, right? Yeah, there was literally a monkey in that. They put a chimpanzee in it to walk around this costume. Poor thing. Although, I don't know why they couldn't have just gotten a kid to do it, or a person, whatever. Anyways, lately when I've been looking at these like robot crickets that everybody's calling a robot dog, every time they say robot dog, this is what I think of. Every single time, even though it kind of looks like a robot bear. I'm just saying. I gotta go. I gotta go buy a fallout shelter. Not because I need one, but because I think it'd be a cool like man cave till it was full of farts.